What you're about to see isn't just a talk show gone wrong, it's the moment daytime TV met its match, and the internet crowned a new king of clapbacks. Picture this: Samuel L. Jackson, the man who survived Killer Snakes, Jedi Wars, and Quentin Tarantino himself, sitting across from Tamron Hall, and the look in his eyes says, "Try me." But what happened next? A single phrase, 3 words long, stopped the entire studio cold. And by the end of this video, you'll see why Tamron Hall might never recover from this broadcast. Let's break it down. The cameras were rolling, the lights were flawless, and the audience was hyped. Tamron Hall strutted out with that signature confidence, smiling ear to ear. The intro music faded as she looked into the lens and said, "My first guest tonight is a one-of-a-kind movie star, the legend himself, Samuel L. Jackson." The crowd roared, phones lifted, everyone ready for a fun, harmless interview. It was supposed to be smooth, warm, and respectful. But what happened next? No one could have scripted it. Because just 10 seconds later, the entire vibe flipped like a switch. Jackson walked out cool as ever. Sharp suit, calm smile, the kind of presence that owns a room without saying a word. He sat down, leaned back, and gave Tamron that trademark grin that says, "I've seen it all." The audience clapped again, expecting banter about his latest movie. But Tamron wasn't starting with small talk. She leaned in and, with a grin that didn't quite reach her eyes, asked, "So, Sam, are you 74 or 75 now?" That question hit harder than anyone expected, and not in a funny way. The crowd chuckled, but it wasn't real laughter. It was nervous, confused, the kind of laugh people use when they're not sure if they should. Jackson didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't even blink. He just looked at her, that cold, calm, professional stare that says, "Did you really just go there?" The cameraman zoomed in instinctively, and you could feel the silence stretch through every corner of the studio. And when Samuel L. Jackson goes quiet, you listen, because silence from him usually means something's about to explode. Tamron tried to play it off with an awkward giggle, waving her note cards like she'd just made a harmless joke. But the damage was already done. Jackson's face told the story, pure composure, but his eyes? Razor sharp. The audience could sense it too. One second it was a daytime fluff interview, the next it was a standoff. And the craziest part? This wasn't even the question that broke her. That one was still coming. Behind the scenes, producers were already panicking in the control booth. You could hear whispers over the headsets. "Cut to camera 2! Stay wide! Stay wide!" But there was no cutting away from this tension. This was live. Millions were watching, and every single one of them could feel it. The moment a seasoned actor turned a talk show into a masterclass in composure. And if Tamron thought that was bad, the next question she asked would make history. Tamron could have stopped right there. She could have laughed it off, shifted gears, and gone back to promoting Jackson's new film. But instead, she leaned in. The grin on her face tightened, her tone changed, and you could almost hear the producers holding their breath. She said, "You've been in this game for decades now, Sam. Do you ever worry about staying relevant?" And just like that, the temperature in the studio dropped again. The audience froze. You could hear the faint hum of the lights above the stage. Jackson didn't move. His shoulders stayed relaxed, but his eyes narrowed just slightly, that famous look that could melt glass. The crowd wasn't sure whether to laugh, gasp, or pray. It was like watching someone poke a lion with a stick and then wait to see what happens. Because when Samuel L. Jackson gives you that look, you know you've just stepped into dangerous territory. Tamron tried to fill the silence, but her words came out shaky. She fumbled with her note cards, throwing out phrases like, "People online say," and "industry insiders whisper," basically feeding gossip to one of the most respected men in Hollywood. Jackson stayed silent, letting her dig the hole deeper with every sentence. The studio audience looked back and forth like it was a tennis match between confidence and catastrophe. And let's be real, when silence speaks louder than words, Samuel L. Jackson is practically shouting. Then came the moment that made everyone's jaw drop. Tamron said, "Some say Netflix is where careers go to retire. Would you agree?" That line hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. The laughter died completely. Jackson blinked once, slow, controlled, then leaned in just enough for the mic to catch his reply. "Do your homework." It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. It was precise, final, the verbal equivalent of a mic drop. The crowd didn't even know if they were allowed to clap. That's how heavy it got. For a second, you could see Tamron's smile falter. The grin that had been camera-ready seconds ago now looked frozen, like she just realized this wasn't going her way. She stammered out a half laugh, tried to change the subject, but it was too late. Jackson had taken control without raising his voice, and everyone watching knew it. Because this wasn't a feud, it was a masterclass in power. Backstage, producers scrambled to cue the next topic. The teleprompter scrolled faster, trying to redirect the train wreck. But Jackson didn't need to say another word. He sat there, calm, collected, unbothered. The veteran who'd seen every trick in the book. Tamron blinked rapidly, pretending to move on, but you could feel it. She knew she'd lost the room. And the worst part? The internet hadn't even seen it yet, but they were about to. The studio went dead silent. You could almost hear the cameras whirring as Jackson's words echoed through the room. "Do your homework." 3 words, delivered with the calm precision of a sniper shot. Tamron blinked, froze, and for a split second, you could see it. That flicker of panic behind her smile. And that's when everyone in the audience realized this wasn't TV anymore. This was a reckoning. The crowd didn't laugh. They didn't clap. They just stared. One woman in the front row mouthed, "Oh my God." The sound techs exchanged looks. The cameraman panned too fast and had to correct himself. The entire set felt like it was holding its breath. Jackson leaned back, cool as ever, while Tamron shuffled her cue cards like they might save her. "But you can't cut to commercial when you've just been publicly outclassed. Live." Tamron tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come on, Sam, you know I'm just teasing," she said, her voice cracking slightly. But Jackson didn't budge. No fake smile, no polite chuckle, just that calm, dangerous stare, the kind that's made villains crumble and heroes rethink their careers. The power dynamic flipped instantly. Tamron wasn't the host anymore. She was the student getting schooled in real time. And the internet loves a reversal, especially when the underdog isn't who you expect. Within hours, clips of the moment were everywhere. TikTok edits, Twitter threads, Instagram reels, all replaying those 3 words. Do your homework. The captions varied, but the message didn't. Tamron tried it and got cooked. Samuel L. Jackson just ended daytime TV in 3 seconds. Every frame was being analyzed like it was a courtroom scene. Because when a legend goes viral, the receipts write themselves. Some fans pointed out how calm Jackson stayed. Not angry, not loud, just surgical. Others said it reminded them of his Pulp Fiction days, the same cold authority, the same controlled fury that made him a household name. Memes flooded timelines showing him holding a Bible, a lightsaber, or a microphone with captions like, "He told her the truth and it was biblical." It wasn't just trending, it was evolving into internet mythology. But the internet's memory is sharp, and it doesn't stop at the surface. Old interviews of Tamron resurfaced, moments where she'd been accused of being condescending or too sharp with certain guests. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. It wasn't just about one awkward moment, it was about a pattern. Commenters started asking if her show had become more about shock than respect. And in the court of public opinion, once the crowd turns, there's no commercial break to hide behind. Meanwhile, Jackson stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews, no explanations, just silence. And that silence said everything. The legend didn't need to speak. The footage was already doing it for him. Every outlet, every gossip page, every podcast had one question. Was Tamron Hall about to lose everything over 3 words? And the craziest part, we were only halfway through the firestorm. Before we talk about Tamron's downfall, let's rewind. Because that stare, the one that froze an entire studio, wasn't just attitude. It was history. Samuel L. Jackson didn't climb to the top of Hollywood by being charming on cue. He was forged in something tougher. And when you know where a man comes from, you understand why he doesn't flinch. Born in segregated Tennessee, Jackson grew up with signs that told him where he couldn't go. He saw the marches, the rallies, the hate, all before he ever saw a movie camera. When the world tried to silence him, he didn't cry. He found his voice and built a career out of making sure no one ever shut him up again. That's not arrogance. That's survival turned into art. At Morehouse College, he wasn't just another acting student waiting for fame. He was the young activist who served as an usher at Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. Months later, he was expelled for leading a protest that made the FBI visit his mother's doorstep. So when a talk show host tries to rattle him, he's already seen worse. Much worse. Tamron Hall didn't realize that behind the Hollywood glamour sits a man who stared down real oppression, not just bad ratings. That's why one smirk from her wasn't going to shake him. It only reminded him of every person who tried, and failed, to underestimate him. And that brings us to the next chapter, the comeback that changed everything. Long before Marvel, before Tarantino, before the fame, there was chaos. Jackson's addiction nearly ended it all. There was a night he woke up on his kitchen floor, surrounded by bottles and heartbreak, with his wife and daughter standing over him. That was the moment where most people would fade, but he didn't. Instead of hiding it, he faced it, checked into rehab, fought through every brutal day, and walked out sober. Just in time for Spike Lee to hand him the most dangerous role of his life, a crack addict named Gator in Jungle Fever. The counselors begged him not to do it. He said, "I can handle it." And that decision turned pain into power. That performance didn't just impress critics, it resurrected his career. Every line, every twitch, every heartbreak on screen came from real scars. He wasn't acting, he was exorcising his demons. Live. And Hollywood noticed. Within a few years, Tarantino called, Pulp Fiction exploded. Suddenly, the world wasn't asking who Samuel L. Jackson was. They were quoting him. Lines became scripture, scenes became legend, and his attitude became the new gold standard for cool. So when Tamron tried to question his relevance, she basically threw a pebble at a mountain. Every studio executive knows, if Jackson's name is on the poster, the movie's safe. His presence guarantees power. His words become memes, his cameos become events, and his voice alone can carry an entire franchise. And yet, Tamron still tried to test that legacy. When she asked if he feared audiences were forgetting him, Jackson didn't snap. He didn't boast. He simply leaned forward and said, "Do your homework." It wasn't arrogance, it was fact. She was standing across from the man who's held up Hollywood for 30 years. And the audience knew it. You could feel them switch sides in real time. Once that clip hit social media, it was over. Within hours, it was everywhere. TikTok edits, remix videos, fan art. People captioned it, "Tamron Hall learned today, and never test a legend." Even celebrities chimed in. Jamie Foxx dropped laughing emojis, and Denzel's fan pages called it the calmest destruction ever. In 2025, that's how careers are judged, by who controls the narrative. Memes compared Jackson to Nick Fury, Mace Windu, and Jules from Pulp Fiction, each time with the caption he warned her. The internet crowned him king of composure. Tamron, on the other hand, started trending for all the wrong reasons. And once the crowd turns, there's no edit button big enough to save you. Podcasts debated whether she'd cross the line. Comment sections were filled with the same verdict. She disrespected a legend. By the next morning, hashtags like hashtag Tamron canceled and hashtag do your homework challenge were trending. And while she scrambled for PR damage control, Jackson didn't post a single thing. Behind the scenes, things got messy. Network insiders leaked that producers were furious. Ratings had already been slipping, and now sponsors were nervous. One insider even claimed Tamron ignored pre-interview notes that warned her not to go too sharp with Jackson. In other words, she was told not to and did it anyway. Executives held emergency meetings. Some staffers whispered that the show might be suspended for reevaluation. The words temporary hiatus started circulating online. And if you know TV talk, that's usually code for we're done here. Meanwhile, fans started demanding Jackson be invited back to teach interview etiquette. The irony? He didn't need to say another word. His silence kept winning. Because in Hollywood, power isn't about who talks the loudest. It's about who doesn't have to. As the interview ended, Jackson calmly removed his mic. He stood up, looked around the studio, and said, "This show won't outlive me." No yelling, no curse words, just finality. That line froze time. He turned, nodded once to the audience, and walked off stage as the camera tried to follow. There was no outro music, no applause, just silence, the kind that lives forever in replay clips. That was the moment it stopped being an interview and became history. By the time the credits rolled, every major outlet was scrambling to cover it. TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, Variety, all asking the same question. Did Tamron Hall just end her own career on live television? And the answer might already be playing out. In the days that followed, Tamron disappeared from social media. Her team blamed editing misunderstandings, but fans weren't buying it. Sponsors started backing out quietly, and clips from her older interviews resurfaced, painting a pattern of disrespect. And in today's culture, perception is everything. Meanwhile, Samuel L. Jackson returned to set, filming, laughing, unbothered. His silence spoke louder than any PR statement ever could. One insider even claimed that when asked about the situation, Jackson simply smiled and said, "She learned." And that right there became the final punchline. So here we are. One viral moment, two very different legacies. On one side, Tamron Hall, whose search for a headline might have cost her the mic. On the other, Samuel L. Jackson, the living embodiment of poise under fire. In the world of entertainment, moments like this decide who fades and who becomes immortal. And if there's one lesson in all of this, it's simple. You don't test a man who built his career on being unshakable. Because in Hollywood, respect isn't given, it's earned. One stare, one clapback, and one legendary walk-off at a time.